sooner or later you can bet your life that every Jew in this building is going to say the same thing. He's a little too Jewish for my taste.
Shalom, and welcome to the Two Jewish Radio Show with Rabbi Sam Cohen and friends, a weekly serving of everything Jewish. We'll have a great hour together of news, music, comedy, and conversation. Our guest this morning on Two Jewish is Alice Langholt, author of the new novel on Adam and Eve called First Family. Here's Rabbi Sam Cohen and Two Jewish.
Our guest this morning, Alice Langholt, has written a beautiful new novel about Adam and Eve called First Family. Find out what makes it unique when we return in a moment here on Two Jewish. We're delighted to welcome to Two Jewish. Our guest this morning, Alice Langholt, is the author of a new book, First Family, about, well, the first family of humanity, Adam and Eve. Good morning and welcome to Two Jewish.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure. So I have to ask you a funny question. Your previous career, it still is in Reiki work, healing and awakening work. How does that translate to writing?
Well, I do a lot of writing about self-care and about energy healing, and I'm currently in a PhD program in metaphysical science. So I think writing is just a part of me, and I can express whatever I'm thinking about, whatever I want to share through the medium of writing. Before I was into Reiki, I was a Jewish educator, and I do have a master's degree in Jewish studies. And creative writing has always been something that I've enjoyed. I used to write and direct Jewish musicals. When I worked as a Jewish educator, that was something that I did 2 a year. And if I'm not being creative, I'm really miserable. So
I should also note that you are the creator of the Apples to Apples Jewish Edition game, which my family enjoyed very much when my kids were younger. So a little bit of personal revelation there. Your book is about Adam and Eve. You did bibliodrama for a long time, for a couple of years. Did that contribute to sort of developing the idea that you wanted to write about the first family?
Yeah, it did. Exactly. In fact, that training is what I got my master's degree in for my Jewish studies master's degree, because I did my thesis about how to use bibliodrama to teach Torah in the classroom. And so it's a really cool process and really creative and fun and interesting, thought-provoking and all of that. And so I guess I was really bored one day, and I was teaching a Parsha Shavua class, and so I needed to do some, biblical discussion with my bored 7th graders, and I wanted to find a new way to talk about the text, and so I started playing around with the Breshit story, and I started doing some creative writing using the bibliodrama technique with myself. And I started it as a blog, and this was a long time ago. This was back when blogs were kind of a new thing.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was a long time ago. So I would just put a new entry in every couple of days, it became a creative writing exercise for myself as I studied the text, and it was just fun and fascinating, and people started reading it. And I would get like 300 comments and things like that, and it became kind of interesting until the blog platform decided they were going to shut down. I had heard that they were going to close, so I copied all of my posts and saved them in a document, and I continued by myself until it became the book, but it wasn't the book yet. It was good, but it wasn't good enough, and I basically shelved it for about 10 years.
Well, we will come back and explore more about how First Family evolved over those 10 years and when you came back to it with Alice Langholt. When we return in just a moment here on Two Jewish. We welcome back to Two Jewish. Our guest this morning, Alice Langholt, is the author of a new book, First Family, about Adam and Eve, a very creative and kind of different approach to the first family of humanity. She's a Jewish educator, a Reiki, instructor, teacher, expert, and a very interesting and dynamic person. You mentioned when we spoke earlier about the fact that you had this as a blog and then you put it aside for about 10 years. How did it come back?
It came back when my daughter, I have 4 children, and that sort of happened in the meantime of my blog being...
Oh, yeah, just along the way,
Exactly. So my number two, my daughter Sari, is a really, really good writer, and I was telling her about this because it's always been close to my heart. I've always really enjoyed the process of writing. I discovered so much. Thinking about parenting, thinking about grief. I mean, if you're going to explore the characters of the Adam and Eve story in a first-person way, you have to think about the emotions and the step-by-step things that would have happened with children growing up and why all of these things happened and getting into the minds of any of these characters. So it was a very personal experience to write this. And so I was talking about it with Sari, and she said, well, let me read it. And I'm like, well, I just don't think it's, it's not ready to publish. She's like, let me read it, Mom. I'm like, okay. So I let her read it. And she came back to me. She goes, this is really good, but it has too much tell and not enough show. And I said, I know that's a literary thing, but I'm not really sure what that means. And she goes, Mom, I can help you. Let me work on it with you. And I said, okay. So we spent 4 days together over the summer, totally immersed in sensory experiences and translating them into descriptive words, meaning like we laid outside on the grass and described what that was like without using words like I'm laying in the grass. But what did it feel like to do that? What did it feel like to discover that you have a face? And we made that part of Adam's awakening, discovering his face without knowing what a face is and what does that feel like. So describing the tactile, sensory words, and and all these different places in the book where we stopped and did things to try to really understand what does this feel like and describe it rather than just talking about it. And that 4 days that we spent together, like full time, was really wonderful for the two of us and extremely wonderful for the book. It made the book so rich and so real and so vibrant that when we were done and I had gone through a few more editing passes on my own, I knew it was ready. And I published it.
There are a variety of different approaches to the story of Adam and Eve. You can make a case that there's two different approaches in Genesis itself. Was it all sort of emotive? How did you make the choices that you made?
Well, I chose the one that had a little bit more story. Okay, and so that's the one where Adam is alone and names the animals, but feels like he's the only one and kind of asks God, or expresses his loneliness to God, and God creates Eve from his rib, or so, the story goes. And I was very careful when I was doing the reading that not to contradict the text. So I chose that story because it had a little bit more information, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't writing anything in there that contradicted what was in the text, but the text is very sparse and leaves an incredible amount to the imagination, which made it really fun, actually.
What was the most surprising thing you experienced in writing First Family? What did you come up with that you didn't expect?
Yeah, so one thing that I had to ask myself was, why did they make an offering to God? It does not use the word sacrifice, so they weren't killing anything. But why did they decide to make an offering to God? Where did that idea come from? And what was the purpose? And how did the boys get involved in this? There had to be a lot of planning. There had to be a lot of discussion. And I needed to explore the question about what was it they wanted in deciding to do this. And that, I decided, for the purposes of this book, was that Adam was the one who had initiated it because he wanted to establish a relationship with God. After being kicked out of the garden, after they left, they really didn't have any more dialogue with God in the text. And I thought that it would make sense for Adam to still be wanting a relationship, to hear from God, versus, perhaps Eve maybe not being that interested in comparison. So I thought, if this is Adam's idea and Adam wants a relationship with God, which of the children, are going to be engaged in that the most with him, and it made a lot of sense that it would be Abel, especially based on what happened, but that he did get Cain to do it also. So I had to explore Cain's feelings about all of this, and Abel and Cain having never met God. Like there was so much to explore in terms of like this, who is God and how can I have a relationship with God? So that was a very big part of the story. And I think it's an underlying theme for Eve. And you know what else I discovered, which was amazing, Rabbi, is that as I was exploring all of these characters, I realized that I am all of these characters. My own spiritual path and search is woven in here in such a way that I just really could see myself, and especially Eve, of course. I had a lot of skepticism, or basically need for confirmation, which is where Reiki kind of came into my life and made a difference for me. Because Reiki is an energy healing method where I can feel energy and I can help somebody and they can feel it. And it's very fulfilling to know that there's something bigger than my own physical self that I can use to help somebody, and it is a part of like the echad, and that's a whole other discussion. But
right.
All of that,
Sure. There is such a sense of discovery in the book, particularly in the opening stages, in which both Adam and Eve, I guess they're not named yet, are kind of trying things and finding things, which is, I think, a part of the story that textually in the Tanakh and then really even in Midrash gets skipped right over. You just kind of go into the moral issues or the developmental issues. You spent a lot of time in that development. Was that a choice, or did it just seem like a natural course?
I think it was necessary because in order for someone to feel connected with one of these characters, they have to say, well, what was it like to wake up? I mean, that's a question I had to answer right from the beginning. What was it like to suddenly wake up and be alive and be aware, and everything is new and a little scary and something on so much sensory input. I mean, if I had skipped that or not gone into detail, I wouldn't have done justice to the character's development at all, or the story. And it's not, and I think it's equally as important. This whole coming into awareness is a part of life, and as parents, as people, as children, like everything is a new experience when we first experience it. So I felt like it was incredibly important. And then, of course, later, as they become parents, and then there's so many questions, like how did they discover the body of Abel? What did they think happened? Cain was gone. Where did they think he was? And they had to try to piece together. And then what should they do with this body? What did they think was going to happen? Would he wake up? What could be done? And all of these feelings and all of them, then what? The next year, then what? What happened between then and Eve being pregnant with Seth? I mean, there's so much relationship.
It's funny. I don't know why this occurred to me, but I was thinking of that song from Company by Stephen Sondheim, Being Alive. It's about that intensity and experiencing that, which is a very different way to approach it than most people approach the text. It works, I think, very well. And it makes it fresh and different. There have been other efforts to create, of course, novels based on biblical stories. Anita Diamond's The Red Tent comes to mind, lots of others. Some of them fall into traps. You try not to do that. Was that conscious also?
Very. That was extremely deliberate. And I'll tell you why. I really have a very deep respect for the text. I mean, as, the Jewish educator and as a Jew, I really, grew up, with the reverence for Torah in terms of what can it teach us and what can we learn from it, especially, what is the point of this being a sacred text and that exploration. I was very much against going, contradicting the text in any way, because I feel that makes Midrash authentic if it's true to the text. And that's one of the problems I have with the Red Tent, is that she does cross that line. Diamond crosses that line and even says, well, the text, the story says this, but that's not true. It goes like this. I mean, one of her characters says that. This is what really happened. I was not going to do that. I wanted this to be something that could have happened. It could have happened this way. Now, I don't believe that this is that it factually, this story is true exactly. I don't. But that's not the point of this. The point is to explore the humanity in the story, personalize it, and learn from it. A story of growth and hope and faith and grief and, being alive.
What was the most fulfilling part about creating this?
Well, besides working with Sari.
Yeah, that's kind of fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I shouldn't even say besides, because maybe that is what was the most fulfilling. I would say that was the number one, and maybe I have two, but the number one thing was working with my daughter and exploring this together as a living connection to a textual story, and so infusing, like there's a Jewish connection that happens when you study it enough to make it personal. And for us to do that together and explore writing together, and then when the book, it did win finalist in the Reader's Favorite International Book Awards for inspirational fiction, I took Sari with me, of course, to the awards ceremony, and doing that together as co-writers basically was a really nice bonding experience for the two of us also. So connection to Judaism, connection to each other, and the process of respecting her as a writer and giving her that kind of a boost because she really deserves it was also a good thing. So I guess that's my number one.
Where can people find out more about it? Where can they get it?
Well, the easiest place, of course, is Amazon. It's really the easiest.
It is for sure.
Barnes and Noble and all.
Yeah, that's right. No, I know, of course.
You know what else? Though I did also publish it for Audible. So I found a voice narrator, and he's a guy, and he did the audiobook version of it, and I think he did a splendid job. So the Audible version is really kind of cool for those who like audiobooks.
And people can also go to your website, which is alicelangholt.com.
Yeah, that's my author website. And there you can also find some videos, and which are also on YouTube, of Sari reading some sections of the book and me reading some sections of the book also, if you want to get a sense of what it sounds like.
Alice, thank you for a great visit here on Too Jewish, and best of luck with First Family.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. By the way, anyone that visits my website, they can have a digital copy free if they want to leave a review on Amazon, and they can request that through my website.
No, that's a deal. Thanks so much. When we come back, we'll hear about next week's guest and get a final musical play out on Too Jewish.